name is Miriam. I've been in Israel for about 20 years. I'm a clinical social worker, and I've been working in private practice for 17 years and doing a lot of work with trauma. And as time went on, also a lot of work with complex trauma. So trauma that occurred over a long period of time, often in childhood. And I started to come across kind of a dilemma with a lot of clients that I worked with who had complex trauma histories, which was that individual therapy was not quite enough to help them to move forward. So even if I was seeing someone twice a week, even if I would have seen them 3 times a week, therapy would often become kind of like a holding pattern, and things would get very stuck. So I'm going to speak about a case example of someone who actually really sort of gave birth to, in my mind, to the need for a program like this. And all of the information is very changed and combined with other people. So this is not recognizable at all. But there very much are, stories along these lines that as I encountered more and more of these kind of clients, I sort of more and more began to look for a place to refer them to that could give them kind of an extra layer of holding beyond what they could get in individual therapy. So, the following. So a girl who was one of the youngest kids in a large family. She was known when she was a little girl as like the unhappy child. Like she's always crying about something. Why is she crying? Why she was crying? Why she was sad? What's the matter? What she was complaining about? And that was kind of like her persona in the family. A lot of looking for attention from her mom that she never really got because her mom was very distracted and overwhelmed. So like a childhood memory that stands out for her was sort of organizing the entry area of their house with the shoes and the hooks and organizing everyone's bags and coats and lining up all the shoes and, like dusting the whole area and waiting for her mom to come home and notice and appreciate what she had done. And her mom came home with groceries and with things and with other kids and was distracted and threw things down and never noticed that kind of work she had done. So, and she kind of just sat with her, not feeling seen and appreciated as something that really stood out for her from childhood. A rough start. Then her family made Aliyah when she was 12. So she, had a new language, culture, social standards, everything to contend with. And she also had some learning issues, some ADHD, some struggles in school that she had even before Aliyah when she knew the language. So was like really, really struggling academically and feeling pretty poorly about that. She got to high school and discovered that she was talented in theater. And her high school had the play in her high school was a really big deal. And it was this like tremendous opportunity for her to shine. And for the first time, she felt like really appreciated and in the center of things and successful. And she felt great. And that really became a real source of strength for her. And she connected to the theater teacher in her school, became a really positive role model and connection for her. And then after high school, she heard about overseas, like a theater camp for talented theater kids. And she applied to it and she got herself into it, but there was no money for her to go. And she raised money for herself to go. And she was really excited. And she went off to, overseas to go to this theater experience. And she was going to stay with relatives while she was there. So while she was there and embarking on this theater experience, she was sexually abused by the relative that she was staying with. And this really derailed her. She finished out the theater camp, but it didn't go that great. Came back to Israel, was supposed to start a post-high school program and came back in like a really terrible state, which nobody understood, and said, oh, I guess it was a big mistake that we let you go to this theater camp, right? Like, look how you came back. And she was, using a lot of drugs, smoking a lot of marijuana, getting through the day, and started a lot of acting out sexually and putting herself in situations where she was pretty vulnerable to further abusive situations. During this period of time, she met a guy who she started dating seriously, who was also similarly had been through a lot of trauma and was struggling. And they sort of created a vision together of getting better and having a healthier life together. Got married pretty young, and her husband did manage to become pretty functional in a lot of areas. Went to the Army, had a successful experience there, went to school. And meanwhile, she sort of like descended further and further into her many layers of trauma and difficulty. And when I met her, had been married for 6 or 7 years and was not able to work. She was a tremendously creatively talented person and had all kinds of gigs, organizing events, setting up for parties and different things, which like when she did it and when she showed up, she was amazing and incredibly talented, but had a really hard time being consistent. And when I met her, basically was in a situation where she was mostly on her couch, really, really struggling to function at all. Had been in a couple of different DBT programs, and which had just sort of been like false starts for her. She was smoking a lot of marijuana, daily, to get through the day. And her marriage was really, really strained in terms of he was in school working, they were struggling financially. And she was really, on a good day would kind of get up, do the dishes, do a load of laundry, but not much more than that. And on bad days was in bed or on the couch. Had been to a bunch of different therapists, and came for therapy at that point, really, really wanting. Her goal in coming to therapy was, I really want to have a normal functional life. I want to be a real partner to my husband. I want to have a child. I want to be able to have a job. She'd had a string of jobs at this point, which like in her telling of them, each one had ended because the boss had been absolutely terrible and had done some terrible injustice to her. And it had ended like in a major, fight on a bad note. And she was very much aware enough to see how poorly she was functioning, and for that to be very, very painful for her, and really wanted to join the functional world of adults. So we started working together, and what quickly developed was every week she would come with a crisis of the week. Usually something with her family, something with her mother-in-law, something with her husband, something with her a sibling, whatever it was, that it was like some major blow up. And so I would try to kind of help her through that and coach her through that. And as we were doing it, to work on some skills that she could take with her that maybe she could apply to other situations. And then it would touch on these, many layers of trauma that were being activated through whatever situation was coming up. And I would feel like, okay, we can use this situation to now sort of like start working on these deeper issues. And then the next week she would come with a totally new crisis of the next week. The last one, long forgotten, totally irrelevant, not wanting to talk about that or follow up with any of the things that we had been, sort of the themes that had been touched on, because there was a new major crisis that she was completely flooded with. So, and then periodically would come in and say, how come you don't help me with trauma? I have so much trauma, right? I have all of these traumas that I need to work through. And I would say, okay, great. Let's try to work on this trauma. Where should we start? Let's find this starting point. But then the next session, there was another crisis. And so we never got to continue with that. So we basically were in a holding pattern where every week there was a crisis of the week that needed to be dealt with urgently. And since we were always dealing with the crisis of the week, we could never really work on developing skills for emotional regulation or processing any of the underlying trauma. But because there were so few skills and so much underlying trauma, there would always be a crisis of the week. And so we remained. And about a year into the therapy, she was in the same place that she had been when she started. And I want to just clarify that, not getting worse is not a bad thing. I think that therapy can keep someone afloat, and I'm not underestimating the value of that. At the same time, I think as a clinician and as a client, it's very frustrating a year in to to be basically struggling with the same issues and in the same place and not have progressed. So at that point, I said to her, you really need a higher level of care, right? You really need something else. Thinking in my mind, oh, a higher level of care, great. That's no problem. Once we decide that, then certainly there will be something that will really, meet your needs. So this was someone who didn't speak Hebrew well, even though she had been living here for a long time. Hebrew was going to be a real struggle for her. She at this point had a job that was very good for her to have that accountability and structure in her life. So a program where she would have to be full-time and she wouldn't able to work was kind of counterindicated. She was really working on her marriage. So something that would be residential and she wouldn't be able to sort of stay connected to her marriage and her family was not something that was an option for her. So I started looking for like what's out there for her. And I started searching in different Facebook mental health groups and whatever. And what I kept coming up with when I would search was me 5 years ago asking for something like that for a different client that I, had, like I kept coming up with my own old searches. So I started to kind of just fantasize about if I could start a program for her. And it was really, the truth is we explored a million different options. We thought about sending her to like an outpatient rehab, even though she really wasn't an addict. The marijuana use was really very not at all primary. The issue was trauma, not addiction. But because she so badly needed a structure and a community and something that would be able to facilitate her being able to do deeper work in therapy. So I started to fantasize about where would I want to send her if I could create like my dream program, and started really researching and thinking and speaking to people. And what I came up with basically is the model of Alumah. So it was a year of research and thinking. And what I found was that, when we are working with trauma, we want to look at all the aspects of a person that have been affected by trauma and really work on healing through each of those avenues. So we want to look at something that's top down, meaning using our cognition and behaviors and nervous system and how that affects everything else. So DBT is our top down modality, which is really learning new behaviors and ways of thinking and ways of reacting. You want to work bottom up, which is working on the trauma directly that's stored in the body and how that will kind of come up and affect the rest. So our trauma sensitive yoga addresses that. And the third is, we would say, working through the side door, which is the creative spirit, the ability for play and creativity and those aspects of the person. So that's our expressive arts therapy. And I'll just say a quick note before handing it over to the therapist to speak about what they've been doing in their groups, that when I first envisioned this, I saw these three things very much as three independent strains that would all be independently helpful for a person to be working on. And what I didn't anticipate is really how important it is that these modalities are integrated together and how much of an effect they have on one another. And that it's really kind of the interweaving of these different modalities that allows the growth to happen that we're seeing. And one other note of something that I didn't anticipate is that I really saw each of these modalities as so powerful. And what I didn't realize was that the most powerful aspect of the program for everyone who's been through it wouldn't be any particular modality, but the sense of community and belonging that they discovered through being part of the group. And I think especially with these kind of higher functioning people who are not necessarily in and out of hospitalizations and in the system, are really not exposed to other people who are experiencing the world the way they are, with the challenges that they are. So it's been really, just taking away that isolation for people to feel that I'm not the only one who's going through life this way and experiencing things this way, and myself and relationships, and to really have that sense of belonging has been a very powerful aspect. So we'll speak about more of those things, but I want to now turn it over to Rachel Oren, who is our trauma sensitive yoga facilitator, to talk about a bit about her work and what she's been doing in Alumah.
Okay, thank you so much. It was really wonderful to see so many faces this evening and to share with kind of our side of things in the Alumah program, which is really a very special program. And it's been A real honor for me to be a part of it since its inception 3 cycles ago. So as Miriam said, I am the facilitator of trauma sensitive yoga. I facilitate trauma sensitive yoga, which is currently the world's only evidence-based style of yoga for the treatment, specifically the treatment of complex trauma, like Miriam said, from the bottom up. Contrary to mainstream yoga, so any other form of yoga that you see in studios or in gyms or even in therapeutic situations like yoga therapy, which can address lots of different kinds of issues. Trauma-sensitive yoga is based on trauma theory, attachment theory, and neuroscience. The actual protocol, the methodology, what we are doing practically in any given practice and session has its fundamental roots within the world of mental health and trauma care versus yoga philosophy and technique that is based from tradition in India. So that being said, the entire crux upon what we are doing is very different. And the goal, the overall therapeutic goal of trauma-sensitive yoga is to develop a different relationship you have with your body by exploring and noticing sensations, by exploring what it means to have choice in your body and to exercise control over your body, to interact with the different ways that you can feel and sense your body within the context of yoga forms. So that's the overall kind of picture of what we do. If I'm going to get a little bit more specific in terms of description of what it looks and feels like, there are 3 kind of central themes that guide the overall practice itself. The first one is called empowerment of the survivor. And that is, taking what we all know to be true, which is that in scenarios of complex trauma, it's an acute experience of a total lack of power, of control, of choice over your body. And whether or not we experience trauma as directly something that physically we interact with, our bodies being kind of the target or the canvas of things that happen upon it, or whether it be more kind of peripherally experienced things like neglect, the trauma of absence, those kinds of things. These things have an effect on how we feel in our body, specifically the sense of ownership that we have over our body and the sense of control that we have. So in order to flip that on its head, absolutely everything we do is based on invitation and choice. I very often cause participants, whether it be in this program or in other scenarios, to sometimes get very distressed because they're not used to making choices in their bodies. They're not used to someone saying, "What do you choose to do?" I give them different options, but literally absolutely everything from where they place the mat to how long they want to practice to the different forms, how they want to kind of build it upon themselves is entirely up to them, with me just being a guide. I sometimes say, it's almost like being a tour guide or offering a buffet. Like I can offer you things that you can look at or things that you can eat, but it's up to you to choose what you want. So instead of saying things like, okay, everybody now reach your arms up very, very high, keep going, more, and stop. It sounds more like whoever wants to, you're welcome to raise your arms as high as you choose. And you're invited to notice how that feels and perhaps exploring for as long as feels appropriate for you. So that's a little bit about the importance of choice and empowerment of the survivor. The next aspect is the therapeutic relationship. So just like in any kind of other therapeutic setting with any other treatment or professional or practitioner, the therapeutic relationship is what envelopes everything and what really gives it that soft padding and ability for people to be vulnerable. I once thought that offering choice was the front door into somebody developing a relationship or a new relationship with their body, but I was very wrong. And I realized that when I once had a participant, not this was before in a different scenario, that they said, "I don't want to choose because I'm afraid you're going to punish me if I choose wrong." So it's the relationship that facilitates the ability, the vulnerability it takes to choose and to notice, the bravery it takes to notice what you want and to actually act upon it. So that's the second part. And the third part is the actual mechanism of how the brain and body communicates with each other in response to our surroundings. And in this context, how it's impacted by chronic survival. So specifically, I focus on something called interoception, which is quite literally how we notice, sense, and understand physical body sensations and body signals. These are all deeply impaired or delayed as a result of chronic survival and trauma for a variety of reasons, which we don't have time to get into right now, but it's one of the things, the very, very psychoneurological concrete things that stands behind this so well-documented phenomena of I feel completely disconnected from my body, or my body feels like it's against me. I can't control it. It does things. I can't anticipate. I don't know what to do with myself. I just disconnect. So what we do in conjunction with a therapeutic relationship, in conjunction with empowerment, is that I draw people's attention to different body sensations that they are noticing or might be feeling within the context of yoga forms. And it's up to them, again, how they want to interact with it. So things like, it'll sound like, if you've chosen to fold forward, you might notice some sensation in the backs of your legs, or you might feel a stretch maybe in your lower back. You're welcome to notice that. Feel free to explore that however you choose, and to let it go whenever you feel done. That's the way, that's kind of the language part of it, how it sounds. And those three things together really create an atmosphere for people to explore their body almost from a perspective of exposure therapy. I liken it to that a lot sometimes, because very often people will say, oh yeah, I've done yoga before. I went in, it was an awful, horrific experience. Of course, because you jumped into the deep end. Not any fault of your own or any fault of the yoga teacher in question, but it was just a mismatch of the therapeutic surrounding that was required to help facilitate that in a healthy way. And within the Alumah program, it's been really phenomenal to see the process that each participant goes through. Yes, in my sessions that I lead with them, but so much of what they are able to do in my sessions is also being supported through the other modalities and through the communication and the coordination between all of us. So I see people, run into the different challenges along the way of feeling disconnected, of feeling overwhelmed by their bodies, but together with the framework that they have in the trauma-sensitive yoga, really are able to go on a journey over the 12 weeks and to establish that new relationship with their body, or at least the start of it. Of course, it's 12 weeks is the beginning. And to take it from there into their other sessions and into their life afterwards. So that is my little spiel about my session. I saw I just lost connection a second ago. I hope there wasn't any interference or freezing, but yeah, thank you so much. I hope that was clear and informative.
Thanks, Rachel.
Of course.
I want to introduce Amir Atsmon, who is our expressive arts therapist, to share a little bit about the work that he's doing.
Hey, everyone. Really glad to be here, and really glad that so many people have kind of tuned in to listen to our work, which I think is really moving and important. And I'm not just saying that because last night was the conclusion of my expressive arts group, and I'm still kind of in awe of the power of art and the power of group work in working with these really kind of challenging and difficult clients through no fault of their own, just because this condition, like complex trauma, just can be so debilitating, and also so kind of like splitting the personality into so many different parts. I'll say that I'm actually trained as a drama therapist, and I have a background and also kind of like a concurrent career as an improvised theater teacher and performer. So my view of art has a lot, is really informed by that. I think art is a lot about taking up space as myself with all my parts, and creating something that conveys and attests to my inner truth. And even allowing my entire being to create something that I'm not planning or I'm not controlling, which can be really, really difficult for people who are struggling with complex trauma. My background is also in somatic work and things like polyvagal theory and a lot of like what is going on in our bodies. And I believe that self-regulation is co-regulation and self-expression is also co-creation. And that's the kind of like dynamic that I want to bring to the groups. I'll say that within the setting of Alumah, we define the purpose of the Expressive Arts Group as follows. I think the motto was to express and be contained. And I would expand that to express and be contained and also held and resonated and cherished. I think there's something really, really special that happens when people create something that is beautiful and or true, or beautiful because it is true. And I think there's something about just making room for how special that is and how much that resonates in other people that is really, really healing. So the first kind of like articulated goal of the group was to allow clients to feel able to enter and sustain a play space that allows freedom and self-expression. And that's a big deal because as we found out repeatedly throughout the group, a lot of people with complex trauma have a very pervasive and tyrannic inner critic. And just this sense of I can't put something that's inside me out there because I will be judged or humiliated, or it could be frowned upon, or it could trigger somebody. And we did a lot of work around this concept from the world of theater, which talks about the differentiation between rehearsal space and performance space. Like, am I performing right now and I have to do my best and I can't make mistakes? Or is this rehearsal and I'm allowed to play? I'm allowed to find out what works and what doesn't. And as a lot of our clients will tell you, they don't have rehearsal space. Inside their mind, inside, it's all performance all the time. They have to be like 10 out of 10. So we worked a lot on that. And I was trying to introduce a lot of playfulness, a lot of improv spirit, and to see kind of like to build gradually this capacity to just play, to just agree to pick any kind of artistic medium, whether it's clay or gouache or pencils or markers, and just start playing with it and see what comes out. Our second goal was to provide a contained experience using specific prompts to create self-exploratory artworks. And this was really, really beautiful and interesting. And clients even started asking for prompts that they could do at home because that was so, I think, fulfilling for them. And a lot of things that came out was just how, regardless of the level of artistic skill or experience, people were just able to create very, very moving images and things that kind of like continue to resonate and inspire and be explored by the group in that session and in later sessions. And I think that really brought out this sense of universality that, oh, this person is struggling with what I'm struggling. But for her, it comes up in these images or in these nuances. And I think because it's not words, because it's this very, very specific and nuanced and like idiosyncratic language of each person's own art and creativity, just the uniqueness of every moment was really palpably felt. And it was like learning about myself through somebody else's perspective, because we're all dealing with very similar things. And it was really moving to see how people created really potent images that, in retrospect, other group members were sharing, like, this helped me understand myself, or this helped me transform my experience, because for you, this is a little bit different. So I tried it in your shoes. Because these images were so clear and so apt in just holding these very difficult experiences that they have. I think one of the most profound things that happen when we do art to express traumatic experiences, or just like the ongoing lived experience of complex trauma, is that there's a sense of externalization. This thing is not something that I am, but it's something that I'm holding in my hands right now, that I can show, that I can talk about externally. I can say, oh, this is it. I can look at it from the outside and explore different aspects of it. In drama therapy, we have this concept of aesthetic distance, which is the distance that I need from the experience to be able to fully feel it, rather than either be overwhelmed and just flooded and like not online enough to process, or too far from it that I'm just like intellectualizing. And our work with art allowed us to use different media to either bring experiences very, very close or push them really far away. For instance, in one of our activities, we were doing this kind of like inside out inspired activity, where I asked each of them to create this kind of like control panel of different emotions that run their minds. But we did that with the artistic medium of a comic strip. So like make these characters especially light and funny, so we can touch on something that's very painful or very daunting, but adding humor or lightness to it. The third goal is I wanted to offer people the opportunity to learn about how to channel different types of experiences into different types of art. And we were really experimenting with a lot of different stuff. We had clay, we had markers, people were drawing, people were cutting up paper and making collages. We were working with rubber stamps and ink. We were working with washi tape. And it was really beautiful to see how even just in the process of making that art, there was so much room for different feelings. There was room for aggression, as one client was just using scissors to kind of like really rough up this piece of cardboard that she was working on, or just having this very, very tender, precise moment of pasting washi tape in just the right way. And I think because it's this external object that you're creating, and there's something about the process of creation which is attuned to so many things inside and to this object that is forming before your eyes outside, that it allows for this beautiful presence of being with difficult emotions. Sometimes even things that would be overwhelming to just talk about or be with, once you have this kind of interaction between yourself and this external object that you are creating, something about this process gives a much broader space of holding. I think also there's, to my mind, there's a profound connection between creation and mourning. And I think that mourning is one of the greatest challenges of people with complex trauma, and just the ability to create something new in the world, and something that is cherished and seen as beautiful and seen as meaningful. And for me as a facilitator, it's always an opportunity to highlight their ability to create meaning, in contrast with all the internal mechanisms that are so preoccupied with canceling meaning or attacking meaning. I'll say that in our group, we also combined a lot of modeling and a lot of psychoeducation. Whatever the group brought up in the previous session, I would bring a poem or a story and read to the group, or just trying to be as playful as I can with things that are coming up. At one point, as I was kind of like sharing with the group how much their artwork was moving for me, they all kind of like gave me these very skeptical looks and said something to the effect, but you're a therapist, you're getting paid to say that. And I was like, all right, I can tell that I'm in the presence of so many inner critics right now that I will have to like really work hard against them. And then we spent the next session working on inner critics and how to kind of like manage them or how to express them. So things kept coming up through the process of creating and sharing and thinking about art that kind of like led this unfolding of our group. I think all in all, one of the goals and one of the results was just creating this atmosphere of a good childhood. We had a lot of laughter. We had a lot of learning. We had this profound permission to show up in any state that people were in and be accepted non-judgmentally. And to have this very sturdy presence of, we're here, we can play together, everything you bring is allowed, and everything you bring will be celebrated and cherished and will be found important and moving and inspiring by the people around you. And I think just working in art, and of course we also had these moments where people were creating these really heavy, really depressing, really painful things, and just staying with them was too much. Was really, really a lot. But somehow we were able to hold that together and move on through. And I have no idea how to finish talking about the group or about art. So maybe I'll just pass it over to Leah for DBT, and then we'll maybe come back to talk about the integration of these three modalities and what that does to the clients and to our kind of like our working culture in Alumah.
Thank you, Amir. I'll just say that Amir mentioned, but we are wrapping up the third cycle of the program this week. So everyone's having their last groups. And so we as a staff are very much in the kind of emotional, riding the emotional wave of finishing this group, which has been a very beautiful process, I think, for us as professionals, as well as, for the women who have participated in it. So we're all kind of in a emotional place about the program right now as we close up this round. So I want to introduce Leah Gottlieb, who is our DBT facilitator, to talk about DBT a little bit and about the work specifically that she's doing in Alumah. You're muted, Leah. I'm muted.
Hi. Okay. So Amir and Miriam, you made it really easy for me to jump in and piggyback off of all the beautiful things you were just saying. So Miriam, you were just talking about ending and her and this kind of emotional high roller coaster of emotions as a staff, as we're closing up such an incredible cycle. So I'm definitely there. Something I've been telling the staff is like the word awesome has taken on like a true meaning. Like we overuse that word, but I'm seriously in awe of these women. It's not such a lengthy program, but to witness the metamorphosis, like sounds exaggerating about the admit, that they've done from when I met them, from the first DBT group till, the last one tomorrow. It's pretty remarkable, really remarkable. Amir was talking about this, very safe holding space with, play and validation that we try to create for them. So something that, is really unique for me, and I hope for the group, is to facilitate a DBT group in that kind of environment. It's a bit different than how, sometimes DBT groups are run. So I'm sure many of you are familiar or kind of familiar with what DBT is. So maybe I'll just give a little explanation of what DBT is as a modality, and then I'll talk about, how I use it in Alumah. So DBT stands for Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. It was developed by Marsha Linehan, originally for a very high-risk population, for clients suffering from, self-harm and intense suicide ideation, kind of like a SOS therapy many years ago. Today, it's used for many populations. It's very popular and helpful, and it's evidence-based, and is really, really effective in helping clients work on their emotion regulation, get real skills to get their life back. Something that's really, really important in working with trauma is empowering clients with skills, even before they can do some of the deeper work. It's crucial. So, DBT has a big focus on dialectics, right? Which is essentially the idea that two totally opposing things can exist at the same time, right? So someone with really extreme emotions, tendency towards impulsive behaviors, has a really difficult time thinking that way, acting that way, right? So we really flesh that out. What does that mean? What does that look like? How does it feel to have extreme thinking and not have any clue what to do with that extreme thinking, right? So DBT is separated into 4 modules: mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. Okay, so pretty self-explanatory what that is. In Alumah, the emphasis is really helping the clients relate to what I'm teaching and apply it to their day-to-day life, and not just, frontal teaching, learning the chomer, getting through, what are the skills, right? So we do it in a very relatable way. There's this very healthy vulnerability that I try to facilitate, where the focus is not people sharing necessarily history, right? Because everyone sitting in the room definitely has painful history. The sharing is more about what's happening today, what's holding me back, where am I reacting and feeling really strongly, and what do I do? And what the focus is on is helping these beautiful women recognize that they do have choice and that they are not powerless the way they feel often most of the day. And it's a very incredible, unique approach, because there's both a cognitive and behavioral focus. And that's really necessary, right? Marsha Linehan talks a lot about this idea that we can't think our way into new behaviors. We have to act our way sometimes into new behaviors, right? So that's skills work, right? So sometimes, what these women really need is help fine-tuning and personally tailoring to their world and their struggles what to do with this mountain of emotions in the face of triggers, right? So we really do that together. And it's been a very incredible experience seeing, women first, second session overwhelmed just by the idea of opening this stuff up and figuring out where to start. And just with time, just being able to stay present in an hour and a half of learning together, super open and curious. There's so much curiosity in the room, right? Mindfulness is a lot about curiosity. A person with significant trauma really struggles to be curious. They're constantly in survival, right? And when I say like this metamorphosis, there's tremendous curiosity in the room. 12 weeks later, they're so interested in hearing what I want to teach them. They're so interested in hearing what the other members have to share, what they've learned throughout the week. Right? So every week I start with the mindfulness, and also there I see how the beginning, sitting through a mindfulness was torture for a lot of them. Now they're much more embodied, engaged, slowly, right? But there's a lot of, there's a significant difference. Also homework, you know, I was scared to say the word homework in the beginning. What would that trigger in them? And now at the end, there's this feeling of like, yeah, can I tell you what happened? You know, I had this interpersonal situation. Can I tell you how I handled it? Or can I tell you how disappointed I was that I didn't know what to do, how to regulate? Leah, can you give me advice? Or group member, can you give me advice? Which skill can I use, right? It's amazing, right? So they've tasted, right, this idea that it's not just about somebody else always supporting me, right? Because a person with complex trauma is forever hungry for that someone else to come in and tell them what to do and how to regulate. They're tasting this idea of self-regulating, right? Of self-soothing. You know, it's DBT, but there's a very large reparenting aspect going on. When we're talking about emotion regulation, the module that I sat on the most, it was the most necessary for this group. It was so powerful to see that many of them just were really, like I said, curious, desperate to learn some really basic things about emotions, you know, and they were open. So tell me, so what do I do? I have this strong emotion. How do I handle it? You know? So this first stage, like I described before, was kind of like priming them to even have that curiosity, to interest, to go there, to see that space where they're closed, not even interested in hearing about emotions or even believing that they can do something about it, you know? And I feel like we, as a group, really moved to that second phase of, you know, experimenting and sometimes succeeding and sometimes failing, but not giving up, starting to feel more power and control over their own journeys and more hope. You know, we're having these conversations, you know, where like clients will describe this feeling of, you know, I tried that skill, I tried that homework, and it was really frustrating because it triggered that feeling of I'm bumping up against a brick wall, you know, and then you'll have another beautiful lady jumping in and saying, I know exactly how that feels. It's so annoying. But did you try that one? That one's a little easier, you know, and suddenly they're sharing with each other ideas of how to keep going, how to keep trying. And that's a tremendous victory, right? That's believing in healing. Right? So DBT in Alumah is not about quantity. It's not about, are we going to cover all the skills? Are we going to compare ourselves to one of these, you know, fancy DBT, you know, inpatient or outpatient programs somewhere? It's about quality. It's about really making sure that what we're teaching is hitting home, is giving take home info helpful for each woman. You know, something that Amir and Rachel both mentioned is it was really, really beautiful to see that, you know, they don't value one group more than the other. They see it really as like this constitution, as like that we really all work together, that each group helps them kind of integrate what they're looking to integrate from this group. A little tiny example, when we were talking about emotion regulation, I brought in Wheel of Emotions, and they were very excited about it. We were talking about it, and they kind of said to me, like, can you reach out to Amir? Like, we want to make our own Wheel of Emotions with him, which was so moving. It was so moving. It was kind of like, I felt this almost parenting moment. Like, can you tell Dad that we liked what you're doing and he should do it too? Can you tell? Like, it was so integrated, you know, it was so special. And you know, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, seeing women with complex trauma excited about exploring emotions is it's just not Muban Me'elav. It's not something that happens every day at all. So I just feel tremendous gratitude to be part of this incredible project and to meet so many beautiful women willing and excited to heal, you know, which is really what I felt throughout this program. So
Thank you, Leah. Thank you so much. I want to just open things up to questions. I also want to introduce, before we do that, Daniela Luden, who is the program assistant. And Daniela has a really very special role, which is that she's the assistant in all three groups. So she's the only person who sees the women in the program in each of these different contexts that they're in. And she's the person who really provides the stability and consistency that she will be there every time. And she really, her official role is to be available to anyone who needs any one-on-one kind of assistance or help or attention during the group. If somebody's feeling overwhelmed or triggered and needs some help kind of getting regulated to step outside, she's available in order to do that without it, kind of disrupting the flow of the group and the presenter. But she's really brought so much more in terms of also bringing her presence to the groups and bringing that like sense of consistency and that there's someone who is going to always be there when they show up. So I want to just introduce Daniela and also for her to be available to answer questions along with us. So does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? You can raise your hand in the Meshulam. Go ahead, you're muted. But let's...
I was wondering, just listening to this, about boys and whether there could be a boys program, whether there'd be interest, whether it's possible, how you see it working the same, differently.
I would love to open a men's program.
Mm-hmm.
We've been just kind of focused on this demographic and kind of learning it. And, this is our third cycle and each one has been an incredible learning experience in terms of fine tuning the best way to do it. But if there's a demand for it and enough people who are interested, I think this would be a wonderful thing. I know many individual men who I think would benefit from the program. My understanding is it's much harder to get groups of men together than groups of women for therapeutic things, but I absolutely would love to. And one of the ideas that we've been exploring this year specifically has been, sort of utilizing this format for Chayalim and Chayalot who have previous trauma histories. So that's, one idea that has been kind of floated in terms of that.
I mean, it sounds to me like a great therapeutic program, even if you don't have previous trauma histories.
Right.
Just the body work and then the artistic, it's sort of inside, outside, and then the DBT, in some sense, binding it together is just phenomenal. I would like to come. But
we need a therapist cycle for, mental health professional cycle.
I mean, so that's it. I mean, in terms of guides, the yoga, let's put it this way. I'm not flexible. I'm not young. And, I can't see myself really accomplishing much with yoga. But the theory behind it, right, sounds useful. So would there be a way, do you think, to bring something else in that's body work, which would work maybe, which would sell better to men? Let's put it that way.
There's a lot of, I've been hearing a lot about boxing therapy.
Right. That's.
I don't know what we'd have to do to sell it to men, but Rachel's group is certainly for people of all levels of fitness. More of a mental block than a physical block for people. But
yeah, so that's something I actually forgot to mention is that it really trauma sensitive yoga. Sometimes the word yoga really kind of causes a very specific image to come up in people's heads about what it is that we're actually doing. So sometimes I refer to it more as trauma informed movement or trauma sensitive movement. It can be done in a chair. It could be done on the floor. It could be done standing. It's really accessible because of the nature of working with trauma impacted populations. I'm all the time dealing with injuries, with fibromyalgia, chronic pain, all kinds of comorbid medical situations. So there's all these kind of the added lens of what people can, can't, won't, didn't do, can't, find it difficult to do. So there's lots of structure and lots of ways around that in it. But I do think that having another program with a different body-based modality like boxing therapy is certainly a very good idea, I think, as well.
Thank you.
Of course.
I like changing it to movement as opposed to yoga, because you're right,
Yoga, yeah.
it does have certain sensitivities.
Mhm.
And yeah. No, Marsha did that, right? With Buddhism. Let's not call it Buddhism, right? Um,
Thank you. Any other questions?
where does Amir practice? If I'm already, where does this take place actually? So you
So-
have a Tel Aviv thing, and yeah.
So it's actually a mobile program. The idea is that we're not tied to any location. Our first 2 cycles were in Beit Shemesh, which is where I'm located. So that's where I did it to get it off the ground. And the current one that we're ending now is in Jerusalem. And then the plan is for the next one to be in Tel Aviv, and then the one following that after the Chagim to be in Jerusalem. So part of the design is that we can rent a space anywhere that there's a demand and be able to work there.
That's excellent.
Yeah. Elizabeth, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I was surprised by your statement of how the more we know, the more we practice in individual therapy. I am a clinical psychologist. The more we see how we need more things to people really heal.
Yeah.
And so I agree that supporting the situation, not getting worse is a big thing sometimes. But seeing people going on and thriving is no comparison.
Yeah.
And I think maybe you should. I'm thinking I am a specialist in eating disorders, and I'm doing it also. I'm also expanding, and I'm. So you do the individual. I would like to know, you do the individual therapy and the team, the group work?
No, so everybody in the program stays with their own individual therapist. And this is like an adjunct to individual therapy. So that's, part of what I wanted to see in this program is that people who are in therapy have a strong therapeutic relationship and are making use of that therapy, don't have to leave that therapist in order to be in the program. And, the opposite, that we work together with the therapist. I'm in touch regularly with everybody's individual therapists. And we're really trying to integrate the care and to coordinate what we're doing, and each sharing what we're seeing. And that's an integral part of it. So I do have a private practice and I do see people for individual therapy. I don't see people who are in the program for individual therapy, meaning for me, it's a different hat, and a different,
You take care in Alumah, you take care of the integration of how things are going. And
that what? I'm sorry.
in Alumah, your role is to take care of the integration and support.
Yeah. So basically, I'm coordinating the program. I meet the 3 therapists and the assistant, and I meet together weekly and talk about what's happening in every group. I meet with each person individually every other week for a check-in meeting, not for therapy, but for talking about how the program is going and if they're meeting their goals and how we can best support them. So each of the therapists shares, with each person what's happening in the group. I share what's happening in my check-in meetings with them, and what I'm hearing from their individual therapist, and sometimes their psychiatrist also I'm in touch with. So we're really all working together on that. So
I'll maybe add, I think that really what's happening in Alumah, like this kind of like culture of doing therapy together that developed, is that we are all together holding the integration, and that we are thinking together everything that's happening to each client in each group. So that means we are all holding what's happening to each of our clients in their bodies, in their minds, in their emotions, in their thought patterns, in their creative patterns, in their social interactions. So it's not about like one person who's making the connection. It's about all of us constantly kind of like seeing each client as, you know, this as great of a whole, as in a way that's as holistic as possible. And I think that that really allows for so much, because I think we're really able to hold all these different things together. I spent the last 3 years working at a hospital unit for treatment of complex trauma, where like the dominant discourse was clinical psychology, a psychoanalytic orientation, and we had art, we had drama, we had a lot of different things, but they all felt kind of like subservient to this clinical model, like psychology or like talk therapy and all these like various psychoanalytic models. That's like the main thing, and we're just like little hors d'oeuvres or desserts.
You're the
And
chugi.
yeah, extracurriculars. So I think this really, like, it's so democratic. There's nothing is more central or more important. It's just like, and I think through that, we're able to really see the person. And like, it's not subjecting them or putting them into a certain theory, and it's not putting them into a certain model. It's just like, oh, this is what happens to them when they do this, and this is what happens to them when they do that. Yep, that's what I wanted to say.
In my experience now doing groups also and expanding the way I act, I think this word, the integration is the key. And it doesn't need to be especially another activity, but this that you do, that is calling the person and saying during the week after the sessions, all the how is it going? This has a very high impact on the people getting better. Really using, incorporating what they are learning and receiving.
Absolutely.
It's big.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that kind of, you know, the integration between the groups that happens very organically between the different modalities. So I know there are a lot of people who have taken what they create in art therapy and bringing it with them to their individual therapist to show it to them and say, like, this is what I've been wanting to express, but I don't have words for it. There was someone who told me recently in the program that she had found the art therapy group in the beginning to be very overwhelming, and it would get very heavy for her, and she would have a really hard time staying present. And she said, it's because of what I learned in yoga about being able to stay present in my body that made me able to do art therapy and stay with it even when it was feeling hard. And I thought, like, that was like such a moment of just this very organic integration of, like, we need not only each of these three kind of kivunim of reaching a person on their own, but we really need them all together to be kind of communicating with one another. So that's really something that's arisen from the clients that we've seen, you know, to become such an important piece of this. Thank you. Any more questions from anyone? Okay. Meshulam, yeah, you're muted.
I noticed you're taping this. Is that going to be available? Because I have a couple of people I would love to show it to.
Absolutely. The recording is going to be available. And I'm also available for follow-up meetings if people have more questions, individual questions, questions about a particular client that might be relevant. So I'm going to send a link to everyone for those things if you'd like the recording.
If you can put timestamps on the 3 different speakers or the 4 on the 3 different modalities, because that way people can say, I want to know about the art, or I want to know about the.
That's such a good idea. I'm going to have to learn how to do that. Yeah.
It's about price, money, who pays, what kind of resources do you have to do all of this?
Important question. So right now it's all private. The cost of the program is 12,000 shekels for the 12 weeks, including everything. And I would love for it to be subsidized and more accessible for people, but I don't have options for that right now. And we're really just developing it and studying it. We're aggressively trying to collect data about it being effective, which is not as easy as it sounds, especially with a very chaotic population, that the progress is not always easily quantifiable. So we're working on that. And I would very, very much love for this to be as accessible as possible. And I know that it's not right now.
This price is for 12 sessions or 12 months of
It's
work?
for 12 weeks. And
12
each week has 3 groups a week, meaning DBT is once a week, yoga is once a week, and art therapy is once a week. I meet with everyone every other week and maintain contact with their mental health team. And I'm available really much more than every other week as needed. And so they really have like wraparound support for these 12 weeks. And then we also, didn't get into this, but we are also very aware of how short 12 weeks is for people. So this is kind of like an intensive, booster. And then we are developing a like continuing community of ongoing groups that people can do that are just a once a week group in different relevant modalities that can be ongoing for as long as they want to be part of it, as much or as little as they want to partake in it. So this first, phase 1 program, you have to do all the groups for the 12 weeks, like everyone's starting together and ending together. It's a real process. And then after that, we want to be available for ongoing support and community for people, but they can kind of determine the level of that. Ganendi, I see you have a question.
Hi, that was exactly what I was going to ask about, if there are any clients who continue into the next round.
Yeah.
And if they want to do it again, if they can.
So we have done one phase 2 group that Amir facilitated and I assisted, which was a very beautiful and unique group. It started the week after Sukkot. So it was we actually delayed starting by 1 week, but it was a real wartime group. Someone in the group, her husband was in Miluim, and it was like a definitely therapeutic experience for all of us, including Amir and I think. And we are planning more phase 2 groups to start soon. And the idea is that those groups would be open to anyone from any of the machzorim from the phase 1. So it wouldn't be them continuing with the exact same group of people. But if maybe, 2 to 4 people from each machzor want to be in a group, we would be able to put that together. Any more questions before we close? Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're really excited about this and happy to talk about it, as you can see. And I will send everybody a link to the recording as soon as I figure out how to do that. And also a link to if anybody would like to have a follow-up meeting. Okay. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you. This was so helpful and educational and inspiring. Thank you.
I'm so glad.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Batya.
Thank you so much. It was terrific.
Pleasure. So nice to see you. Long time no see.